Agency. Today is a very special day as we are having a panel discussion about the topic, domestic violence, and we want to bring awareness to the public because we know this is something that is going on in St. Kitts media that is silent. So we are here with a group of persons that could bring a lot to the table. So allow me to introduce them. In fact, today the theme for this year's domestic violence awareness is no survivor justice without racial justice. Domestic violence increases around the world during this COVID-19 pandemic, and this October, KNA Agency is urging leaders, communities, and individuals to join the chorus and take action to end this shadow pandemic. Today we have with us Dr. Al Kare, who is Director of Health Services at RESVM and Vice President of the St. Kitts and Nevis Medical and Dental Association. We also have with us today Dr. Crawford, who is a psychologist who works at the James Grant Hospital and also has a private practice. We have also Mr. General Boone, who is an entrepreneur, youth and community activist, radio personality, and husband. We have Ms. Chanel Charles, Senior Gender Officer at Gender Affairs. We have Mrs. Jacqueline Finley, Nurse Manager at James Grant Hospital and also Supervisor at KNA Agency. We have Keisha Rawlins, who is the Chronic Metabolic Disease Coordinator at the Ministry of Health and the Women's Ministries Leader of the Faith in Emmanuel SDA Church. We also have Ms. Petra McSheen Morton, who is President of the group Silence No More. We are very grateful for our panelists today because they are bringing to us information that I think that is very pertinent in these times, and we want to highlight what is domestic violence. Now there are many terms and definitions out there, so don't exclude any, but domestic violence is also called domestic abuse or intimate partner violence and can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate or personal partner. Abuse is physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, and actions or threats of action that influence other persons. This includes any behavior that frightens, intimidates, terrorizes, manipulates, hurts, humiliates, blames, injure, or wound someone. Domestic abuse can happen to anyone of any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender. It can occur within a range of relationships, including couples who are married, living together, or dating. Domestic violence affects people of all socioeconomical backgrounds and educational levels. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, regardless of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, state, or class. Victims of domestic abuse may also include a child or other relatives or any other household member. Domestic abuse is typically manifested as a pattern of abusive behavior towards an intimate partner in a dating or family relationship, where the abuser exerts power and control over the victim. It can be mental, physical, economical, sexual in nature. Incidents are rarely isolated and usually escalate in frequency and severity. Domestic abuse may cultivate into serious physical injury or death. Now that was a mouthful, but in reality it's happening, and sometimes it can be very subtle. And so I'm gonna pass the baton on to a male figure here who is not only brilliant, but he will bring a light of fresh air to us because we are facing it today and we don't know. Some men don't seem to want to admit or to bring it to the forefront because unbelievably women do. They are partaking of it and they are also in the, what should I say? They are also victims, yes. So women are not, no, they're not just victims, they are also the perpetrator of such violent acts. So we don't want it to be out there that it's just a woman thing. Men suffer as well. Dr. Pierre, can you shed some light?
Thanks, Keisha. Thanks for having me as always. Whenever Kare Nursing Agency puts something together, and Keisha, whenever I see her number on the other side of that line calling, I know I have to clear my schedule of some part of it. So the response is always almost the answer is yes, no, what's the question? So thanks for having me on such an important topic, and it's important because as you were reading through the definition, I am going through it because one of the things that you mentioned is the subtlety of domestic violence, in the sense that we may not recognize it as that. Sometimes the perpetrator, because of the subtlety, the subtle nature of it, sometimes the seasonality of it, because sometimes you may find that someone is abusive only for a period because of what's happening in their personal lives. So a lot of times I think we need to essentially do that stock taking of ourselves or our relationships and recognize those patterns and seek help when help is required. So that's a very important topic to have, and I think it's not only is it important, but it's also timely. On February 3, 2021, Time magazine referred to domestic abuse or domestic violence as a pandemic within a pandemic, because we've noticed that during COVID-19, amidst the lockdowns and quarantines, individuals who had never spent that length of time in the presence of their family and trying to cope with the joblessness, with the anxiety around the pandemic, domestic abuse rates spiked dramatically all around the world. And this is why I think it is so timely to have that discussion, because we're living in these uncertain times, and the way in which we confront that type of uncertainty as individually and also in terms of a relationship is ever so important. And I hope this reaches a much wider audience, and I hope that it really sparks a debate, not just here, but around the dinner table, right? Around the dinner table. And I hope this is sort of that, that catalyst to having that conversation. So the one I'm quite further, the last individuals here that I want to hear from, and I think the best way to go about this is to make it very conversational, right? There's no structure to it. At any given time, anyone can grab the mic and speak to a particular concern or shed some light from their own experiences. We have individuals who are more experts than others, right, in this field, and I want to not shed the spotlight per se, but I think Dr. Crawford would be well positioned to perhaps be the individual who walks us through what is a very lengthy definition. Like those of you listening may not have gotten all of it, but Dr. Crawford, we can break it down to us in a way that I think that the average person listening can really begin to understand what we're referring to when we speak to domestic violence and domestic abuse.
Good day. Thank you, Dr. Pierre, for that. Keisha, I want to thank you for welcoming me to be a part of this discussion today. And I really like how Time magazine puts it. It's a pandemic. Domestic violence is a pandemic within a pandemic. This current pandemic that we are facing, which is COVID-19, in which persons, as Dr. Pierre puts it, they're going through the joblessness, the unemployment. They have been at home for long periods of time. There's no escape, and they're there with the abuser during times of heightened frustration and disappointment. That's when persons tend to lash out more, and that's when they tend to have more domestic violence. But if you were to look at domestic violence, as Keisha puts it, it's a pattern of behavior, meaning that something that happens over and over again. And the time frame in which it happens can vary. Usually when it's starting out, it could have longer time frames. For example, maybe within a year you might just experience three situations of abuse. However, as time progressed And as situations heighten, you might end up experiencing multiple experiences of abuse throughout the year. So that's what we mean when we say a pattern of abuse. It's happening over and over again with some periods of rest. And the main reason why it happens is because the abuser is trying to gain or to maintain the power and the control over someone, or it could be even persons. So what does this person do? They can have physical abuse, they can have sexual abuse, they can have emotional abuse, and we could even break it down a bit more. Let's look at some typical forms and let's explain them a bit more. So for example, when you hear using emotional abuse, what we're talking about? We're talking about the name calling. So we start out calling, the person might call the person dumb, stupid, foolish, and some more colorful ones that I wouldn't want to say on the ear. They might play mind games with them. They might humiliate them. They might make them feel guilty or make them even feel like they are going crazy. Sometimes they might use intimidation, in which they, just the look they give them. That look. Sometimes when you're growing up, when we're about to do something wrong and the parents give us a look, hey, straighten up, okay? The abuser can start to intimidate them by just giving them that look. By certain actions or gestures they make, they can be intimidating to them. Sometimes they might do things like destroy property. For example, in relationships and where there's abuse, the abuser might destroy the person's phone. They might destroy the person's laptop, things like that. Those are some forms of using intimidation. We also have using isolation. And you would realize there are some subtle things that we would not really think is abuse. But just limiting involvement with the outside world. For example, making the person stay in, not going out. The friends having a little get together, they cannot go. Or if they go, that the partner has to be there, almost like supervising their behavior. Having conversations on the phone with different persons. The abuser might not want that to happen. So the conversations might have to be done on speaker, because the abuser is trying to have control over the person. We could also have using privilege too. Deciding, okay, I'm the person in charge here and make all the decisions. That is a form of abuse also. Or using economic abuse, in which they don't want the person to work, so they want the person to stay at home at all times. Or if they work, they have to bring all their money and give it to that partner. They just control the money. So if the person wants a pair of shoes, they have to go to the partner. The partner looks at the shoe, decides yes or no, and then buys the shoe. And simple things like those are types of abuse. It could even involve coercion and threats, in which that you threaten to leave. So the partner is threatening, I'm going to leave you, I'm going to leave you. Or threatening to harm themselves. If you ever leave me, I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to commit suicide, etc. All these are forms of abuse. Now sometimes we don't really, when we think about it, we don't think about all these other forms of abuse. We tend to think about just the physical, in which, we can really see the black eye, and we could see all the wounds and the injuries on the person. But apart from the physical abuse, it's important to note the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the economical abuse, the psychological abuse, because all these are equally painful as the physical abuse. And I like to stay here. I could go on and on, but I'll stay here.
I imagine, and again, as I said, I'm listening attentively because I think we're all asking ourselves questions. I hope it's not just me asking a question whether any of those things I can relate in any way, whether I have suffered them or whether I am actually inflicting them on somebody else, right? Because we sometimes find ourselves so justified. And the reason why this matters is because I think in the Caribbean context, it's also very important. I don't think abuse happens in a vacuum, in the sense that there has to be individuals who are around you, who are enabling that environment, right? I remember a few years ago I was watching the news in St. Lucia, and this man had used a machete and chopped his girlfriend who attempted to leave him in front of KFC. And the mother, when she came to the news to speak, she said, I could understand that you caught some kids to chop her like that, which means that she had made an allowance for a certain type of abuse to take place. But then you listen to the story, she herself has been abused. So there's a normalization of that factor, in society. You ask yourself, where's the family to come to that person's rescue, right? Where is that individual? Yesterday, I sat with a very young woman in her 20s, and she is now going through a breakup, very depressed about the breakup. And she says to me that she moved to this country and she found this person who helped her to assimilate into the culture here so easily, and that person had left. And the person was the one who broke up with her. She's not necessarily unhappy that he broke up with her because he's disrespectful, he embarrasses all the time, but she is willing to take that embarrassment, and she's willing to take all the, if he would take her back, she would take him back in a heartbeat. And this is a young girl, she's 23 years old. And when those patterns set in at 23, you ask yourself. So I think that the next question for me is, and I want to just throw it out to anyone in the panel, is our Caribbean culture somewhat tolerant to abuse? Are we in an enabling environment here in the Caribbean? Anyone? You can share.
Certainly, that's for everyone. And that's okay. As a listening and as a young woman and as a child growing up in this community in the Caribbean, as women, we do tolerate this kind of behavior. I can think way back when my great grandmother was abused by her husband, my grandmother was abused by her husband. My mother was abused by her husband, and when I got married, I decided it has to stop. So we have to make that conscious decision and realize the pattern. I said, if this is a tradition that is going on within my family, I have to be the one that will stop it. I remember many times I would call my mom because I wasn't living here. I was a young woman, just 21 years old. I got married on my own. I was living overseas. And there was certain things that happened, like what was happening. And as a Christian, I would call my mom and I would talk to her about it, say, I'm realizing certain things, and she would say, pray about it. Maybe, he's upset about something or whatever, what happened to, and my question after what did I do? So I began to analyze, and I decided, when he raised his hand at me for the first time, I decided that's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I have to get over this situation. And that is what I did. I said, I have to break this first. And even though my mother was telling me to pray about it, have counseling about it, and stuff like that, I think as Caribbean women, we tolerate a lot of these type of abuse because we want to protect them. And she will say what the church people going to say about it. But at that time, I tell myself, whether church people talk or not, I'm going to get out because I have seen the way how my great grandmother would have suffered, my grandmother would have suffered, and my mother many times. When I look back at what she had to go through, I say, I can't do that. And so we have to decide as a young woman to break that first.
Why are some women finding it so hard? I mean, hats off to you for recognizing it first. which I think is a challenge for most individuals don't recognize it. Because I think the challenge I face as a Caribbean male is deciding that male archetype. What does it mean to be a strong man? Because the male archetype is largely made up of the protector, provider sort of parameters, right? But we live in a very stable neighborhood. There's no stable type of business, right? And most women earn their own too. So if you lose those roles of protector, provider, then how else do you show your prowess as a male? How else do you show that you are that strong person in that relationship, other than sometimes to exert that type of influence? And men struggle with that because, to your peers, there today in 2021 there are men who come home and if they find another man cooking or cleaning, suddenly he loses respect in their eyes. If a man decides to be a stay-home dad today, for example, because he wants to stay and raise the family, and the woman goes out, suddenly you hear things like, your wife is wearing the pants. And that man feels he needs to now compensate for it. Right? He needs to now compensate by being firm. And then the firmness, the lines become so blurred. So, hats up to you, but the question then is, one, how do we even recognize this? And when we recognize this, because does an abuser just wake up the next day, Dr. Crawford, and starts abusing, or is there a pattern, is there a gradual pattern to a point where it becomes so overt and so visible?
Behavior is learned. Behavior is learned. So, one, they might have been raised in an environment in which they were abused, and then you spoke about normalizing this abuse, so they see it as normal. So they just continue. They go thinking that this is normal behavior, and unless somebody speak up and point out to them that this is not healthy behavior, for behavior that will help a relationship to flourish and to make persons happy, then they might just continue. But they tend to learn depending on the environment.
So why doesn't the abuse leave? Why doesn't the abuse lead to like Nobel? You didn't just.
Several reasons. There are several reasons why people stay in abuse. And Nurse would have spoken about the cultural context and the religious and spiritual aspect to it. Some persons might stay because children involved.
Yeah.
And they have the idea that, okay, they want to keep this family unit together.
Lack of finances.
Exactly.
He's the breadwinner.
Yeah, he's the breadwinner and he provides more money. So they stay for financial reasons.
And sometimes it could be because they don't have anywhere else to go because they already estranged themselves from the family because of the abuser. So they already isolate themselves from the family, so they can't go back home to the family going to them because of what happened.
So what I hear you saying is that there's almost like a systematic sort of approach to this whole thing, because then not only are you being abused, but then somehow you become estranged from your family and friends. Mm-hmm. Is that by choice, or is that the abuser enforcing that?
I think that's basically fear. That's part of fear. I don't think it's necessarily by choice.
Right.
So you want to say fear of dread?
A little bit of both. And sometimes it's also called, I've seen a lot of cases where it's status. It's their status for the community. I can't speak up because I'm a pastor's wife. I can't speak up because, I'm a police wife. Things like that tends to keep, all this bottled in, and I'm afraid to speak up. And I realize only when the situation gets really bad, that's when we will hear, okay, it has been happening for a very long time, but only because they've been to the hospital or they've been to special victims unit, that's when you will hear or everything that comes out then. From listening to Crawford, yes, it's true, definitely, because sometimes when we do intake at the department, we realize when we ask them questions like, when this all started, and they will tell you, it started maybe just after they got married or just after a few weeks after the relationship. And then I would ask, have you ever asked your partner, why they are so aggressive? And they would say, oh, I could remember my partner said that his father was abusive, right? So as Prophet mentioned, that it starts sometimes in home, and it goes along with them into adulthood. Sometimes when I look at it, I realize that all of us have a part to play in the community. If it starts in the home, it starts with the parents. It's not something that is taught to them, but adapted behavior, as Prophet said again. And yes, it's not taught to them, but I guess it's what they see, learn behavior. And the next thing I have realized is that not only that they display within relationships, but friend communication. A friend might say, I've talked to, X, and I realized they're very aggressive. But no one has ever pointed out to that person, you're a bit aggressive, how you take approach on issues and situations. When we talk about the home being responsible, the school, because they slip through the cracks. Yes, they may be very disrespectful and disruptive in the schools, but it just slipped through. Nobody ever said, okay, let me take the child to whether Michelle Blake or Dr. Crawford for an assessment. Let's see what's happening with the child. And then they go to church, same behavior. Nobody's picking up, and you will hear, oh, let's pray for them. It's beyond prayer, right? We sit here and we will talk, but I always say, at the end of all of this, what are we doing as a community, right? I'm from gender, yes, but gender stepped in after the fact, right? What about the pre-programs and assessments and all of that? Right.
So you're saying that in essentially, people, they start from childhood?
It starts in the home. Most times it starts in the home. Because for me, I've realized that when men see their parents are being abused, they look at it as a norm, right? They have a girlfriend and they do the same thing, and they will tell you, oh, my father used to do it to my mother. So is that okay for you to do? Right? But it's a holistic approach, and it's not just an approach from the school or the counselor's unit, but it's a holistic approach. All of us have to step in and say something, because sometimes we see it at church. We see it in little organization, little group, little dance group that these children do have, and we say nothing. Right? So it's all our responsibility. I think Dr. Pierre was talking about the pandemic, during the pandemic. For 2018, we had 100 and Officer Rogers could always chime in because I look at the statistics from most times. But in 2018, we had 120 cases. 90 were females, 30 males.
In St.
This is our statistics here. In 2019, we had 87 cases, so we had a decrease in the amount of cases. We had 80 were females, 7 males. In 2020, the pandemic, within a pandemic now, we had 359 cases. 301 were females, 58 males. So it's really a pandemic within a pandemic, right? It is. When we look at,
and this is just what we know about, because we have a lot we don't know about.
These are the ones that would report to Special Victims Unit or report to a different police station, and all the statistics just come together and make it one report, right? So this is a big alarm for us, right? Yes, sometimes I think that gender can do more, right? It can do more outreach, more awareness, because now we are realizing there's more cases. And what we want and what we hope that there are less deaths every time. Right? We haven't had any for the year. Right. So we're just praying and hoping that we don't have any deaths at all.
And why you speak to deaths, I mean, of course, you know, just the statistics you shared is mind-blowing. We're talking about an over 100% increase.
Right.
Right. Well, 2019 was 87.
Yeah.
And then you have 300 and something. So we're talking about, you know, this is startling, to be honest. And I think it's really a microcosm of a much larger problem. I think if we look at it on a much larger scale, individuals, and the reality of domestic abuse is that it transcends all strata of society, right? There isn't somebody who is too educated or too wealthy to be abused. It happens in every strata, every sphere of our society. That is the incredible thing. I've seen colleagues of mine, doctors, being abused, showing up to the emergency room, and those who cannot show up will call another colleague to come home to tend to a wound that a partner has inflicted, right? Because out of shame. And as a colleague, you tell yourself, a doctor should know better, right? You know, how
police should know better.
You know what I mean? But so I also want to ask a question, because you really sparked something in my mind here, is that in terms of the type of abuse, is there an increase in terms of the severity one that you've seen? And then two, I also would like to understand, because as a male, and I think of myself naturally, physically stronger than a female, I'm very curious to know what are some of the types of abuse that a male may actually undergo or suffer.
To me, mostly verbal abuse and financial abuse from men. That's my opinion. They don't suffer as much physical abuse as the women. It's mostly verbal abuse and financial abuse. As I sat here and listened across the panel, Missionary Child said, you know, we have to help in the community and to see what we can do, because sometimes we want to observe persons in the community or know of persons in the community that are suffering abuse. As Nabella said, you have to put a stand to it. And as I sat one night and I listened to a conversation of a young lady who had a mental breakdown because of a situation, I too was abused too. And I got on the phone and I called the nurse and I said to her, I would like to have a forum and express yourself. And expressing yourself, we might say it's self-explanatory, but it's to voice how you feel, how your emotion at the time and your feelings. And by expressing yourself, help someone else to express themselves. Persons are suffering in silence. They can't speak. It's like, I would like somebody to just say something to me so I can open up or I can get away. And domestic violence is real. It is real. I have worked in the accident and emergency department and I have seen it. And as the child said to status, a lot of people because of their status, because of finances, that they don't want to speak out. But as I listen across here, it is real, and as a panel, we can get, you know, this is the beginning, this could be the beginning of domestic violence. And what I would like to see in Express Yourself is that we have a forum like this and we invite open invitation. Come in and express yourself. Say how you feel. Say what you have been going through. When you look at the psychiatric ward, it's full of people, and they really need to express themselves. And sometimes when I had given the opportunity to work there, I'm listening. I am working, but I'm listening. and it is where sometimes person express themselves. So if they are already, and anybody can cross that thin line. Anybody can cross that thin line anytime, and it's where it's at.
Wow. But those are, I mean, I hear it, and I feel that some type of intervention is required when possible, but often those situations are violent situations. Often you are offering help that is unsolicited and sometimes even unappreciated. And that makes it very challenging for individuals to sort of step in. You hear it. You hear abuse of children. You can know when some type of discipline has gone too far. You can listen to it happening next door. But it's always a very ticklish thing to intervene. So let's assume, for argument's sake, and for those of you who work in that service, if I were at home right now listening to some type of abuse, what resources are available for me in parents and kids? What do you recommend I do? Because if I were to just go to the neighbor next door, there's a good chance that I might find myself as a victim of some type of abuse or harm, right? And that sometimes is very ticklish for some of us. And again, as I said, you have a situation where you have someone who is abused, and that person has been psychologically dominated to the extent that they do not want any type of intervention, right? To the extent for them, this is so normal that they have done something to bring this upon themselves, to the extent that if you intervene, you are meddling in my business unsolicited, and there's nothing wrong here.
Most times when they are referred to gender, we have a set of referral services that we do, but most times some of them will say, could you just take the report? We take report, what does it take statement? So they just want me to take the report. They would say, just in case something happens to them, just in case they die, just in case they go missing. And it's heartbreaking for me to take a report and don't refer, but that's their right. I can't go beyond their right. Most times we have counseling, we could refer them to the counseling unit up at Miss Blake, or sometimes I will call Dr. Parker's office to see if they can be fit in, by Dr. Parker, because sometimes the units, there are less units in it, and the units are overwhelming, right? So we just try to push them in where we can. If they want referral, if they want to make a statement, sometimes they will say they want the matter to go to court. They want to make a statement, then we can refer them to Sergeant Mothers here at the department, and they take a statement, and they would explain to them the legal procedures, what would happen next, where would the case go from here, and what they need to do and how they need to prepare themselves for court. We also refer them to legal aid. Legal aid before was free. Totally free. Now legal aid has a small fine. They're saying that it depends on your income, whether you would pay or not, right? But legal aid is there. Within our ministry, which is social services, because we're under an umbrella of social services, but I'm in gender. But within social services, we have community development. That's another service that we refer to, just in case they leave the perpetrators home and they don't have anywhere to go, they don't have any food. They provide a food voucher, put them on a food voucher this way they can collect, food voucher, and it goes according to, how many children they have in the home. They can also get school uniform, right? It depends on, their income again, to see how best we can help them. In terms of housing, it's a challenge for us. To find housing for persons, but now Garden of Rebirth is open. They opened, I think, it's a week or 2 weeks ago. What the government is doing is that they referred from gender and over to the home, because financially the home has to function, right? So those are the little services that we do. Normally too, when we are doing an intake for them, if we realize they have children and the children are affected, we also refer them to probation and child protection services to see what's going on in the home. How safe are they with their parent, if they don't have somewhere to sleep, that's an issue for probation and child protection services, because you're supposed to have a roof over your children's head. But that's not my domain per se, but yes, we have to call them in to assess the matter as well. So there are set of services that are available for victims and the survivors if they choose to come and ask for help.
That's actually, I wasn't aware that all this was available, and this is very, very important. I hope we can find some time to recap on what is available again, because that's so important for the person who's listening to this and who may need access to those resources. There's two things that you said, and I wanted to just circle back to them. One is the use of the term victim to speak primarily to the individual who is being abused. But is the abuser also a victim, Dr. Carter?
The way people say.
No, because I'm thinking, because I'm hearing the help that is being offered to the abused, and I'm saying what happens to the abuser in that time in terms of
the
reform.
abusers, some of them are victims themselves.
From growing up, and
Not saying it will be a responsibility for your action. Mr. Boone, can you shed some light for us? You're the other way here.
I think here at this point, there may be victim, not necessarily from what is happening in the home, but it can be the stress of the bigger pandemic, the stress of the emotion of the job, even the pressure of you're going to the bar, you come home, meet someone else cooking. You now have to make an impression for the rest of the day. So this is where sometimes some domestic violence will happen in the presence of hunger, and others think it's okay because at this point the accuser is making a statement to the others who just so happen to be doing it to their time to make that statement. So I think I would say yes, they are a victim and those other factors, and maybe if we can spot it and try to diffuse it a bit, the person may not go home to let out that stress, whether it's both me or me.
Thank you for that. And the reason why I asked this question is because, again, I wanted to circle back to the definition you gave and the explanation that Dr. Crockett gave, because I am being very honest, this is not meant to entertain. This is meant to educate to the extent that I am thinking with the definition, whether in any aspect of my life I demonstrate or I have demonstrated some type of evidence of abuse. It's important for us to ask those questions first to ourselves, both male and female, right? Because we may be the primary breadwinner at home, female or male, and we may be exerting some type of force or influence in the home circle that we need to revisit. Because I suspect that from what I'm hearing and what I'm gathering, it starts and then it begins to escalate, and somebody becomes more empowered, and whilst one is becoming very empowered, the other is becoming disempowered, and then suddenly it creates the right environment for abuse to take place. So the reason I'm asking about the resources is I'm saying that there may be a male or female listening to this show right now and asking, as an abuser or a potential abuser, what do I do? Where do I go for help? Because I don't want it to get to that point, because again, society always makes allowances for those things that happen very subtly, and then afterwards, when it really explodes like this, suddenly that's when there's a sensationalism about the whole thing, and that's when it really draws everyone's attention. But we need to kind of nip this in the bud. I'm going to go back to our education system, but I want to stop at the person who might be an abuser, or is even concerned that they may be. What should that person do right now?
I think they should express themselves, as Sister Philly said.
To whom?
Because this is why she's created that platform. This is something new. We want, not me, but she wants to get the bull by the horn with. Because if you have somewhere you can go to, or somewhere you can call, it's anonymous. Nobody knows it. You could probably say much, and after a while, she'll send them on to where they need to go, because I don't think an abuser would call you, and I certainly don't think every victim would call either. So how do we reach those that are silent?
There are persons who are able to recognize that they have an accent. And we could start there too.
Yeah, but they would not call and say, can you help me? Because they're thinking you're only supposed to be helping the victim.
No, but that is gender, and gender is just one arm of the holistic approach. We still have the counseling center, we still have the psychological center.
Well, you tell
We
us
need
now.
for counseling
Mhm.
for these kinds of things. So number one is that they seek help, which is at the counseling center or the psychological services at JN. And I know we spoke, and Miss Charles would have spoken about the services they have and we offer at gender. But what can we do as a community? Because yes, we tend to look for counseling center, Dr. Crawford at gender. What can we do as a society?
Well, recognize it if we see it and report it.
Very important. Yes, you recognize. Yes, you can report.
Allow people to. The thing is, people have to be able to trust you and have the confidence in you.
And here's where the church comes in the community.
When they are failing us, you know, we
As the church have different, the church have different arms in which you have different groups, different societies. You have the women's ministry society, ministry department in different churches. You have the women's group, the men's group. I know that there's an active men's group in the community where men can, you know, come together and talk and stuff like that. And in the church, you have the men's group as well. You have the youth, the different type of youth groups here in St. Kitts and Nevis. You know, that persons can reach out to in the different clubs. And sometimes, like Michina would have said that, we see these things and the children are small, right? We see their attitude. We follow them in church, you know, in different church group. And how can we, as a member or as a leader, pinpoint and say, I think that this child needs counseling. And the thing about it, how can I break it to the parents? Because that in itself is a major issue. How can I say, Keisha, to you as a youth leader? I realize there's some behavioral changes in your child, and I would like your child to have a talk with a counselor or something, and right there and then you don't see the child come back to club because they know, or you think that, or you this or that. How can we reach persons
So
like
this is
those?
why with the status problem we have here in St. Kitts, people in the church is not going to go to the church. They're going to hide. No, you will have that, but if you're already in the church and there's a stigma, you're not going to, like you say, they're going to not come. So this young lady here has a silence no more group.
I think you use the perfect word, stigma.
It is a stigma, and they would not go, the church people would not go there. So where do they go? They
No,
go
but what I
there.
mean is,
If they don't feel comfortable coming to the church.
so what I mean even just beyond the church, the word stigma itself, if we could discredit the word stigma, then we would at least now start building some structure all around. So we make it, there was once during school we had Break the Silence campaign. We make it annoyingly visible. You make the information about domestic violence so they literally in your face every day. So churches, schools, organizations, it almost acts like a staple to our economy. We start letting you know that you need to at least 2 to 3 times per week speak about domestic violence or speak about, hey, you shouting or raising your voice at that point shouldn't really get it. Or accountability. I'm a part of a youth group, and one time I've actually indicated to me, if I ever have to raise my voice above a level that you are not comfortable with, let me know. And sometimes I'm having a big conversation and the adrenaline kicks in and my voice raises. It's just no harm. And then I would realize someone cringe. As simple as that, I was like, oh, and it's not that I'm not even coming at you in anything. Simple as that, I now know that after I can now have a conversation with you. So as to why did you cringe, even though we were in the excitement of the place was. In doing stuff like that now then, you create a warmer environment for the youth itself and ultimately for the parents and the wider congregation, wider class. We as every farm level, every subgroup, we now know that just as much as we speak about finance, just as much as we speak about sexuality, we speak about domestic violence. Dr. Pierre made a point where, and Rafa, they made a point where it's learned, but some of these people who are doing the acts of domestic violence think it's okay because that's how my mommy and daddy showed love. So we as one person see it as my mommy or daddy was abused, the other person see that my mommy or daddy was loved. Whereas I saw a movie lately and the folks are making love and they're holding the person by the neck while they're making love. I don't want to be like, that's cute, or let's say talk to me dirty. Right. But not realizing that the truth be told, outside of that context, more the longer we spend that context, you know, it's like a sword remaining through and we become a wound and then become infectious. Maybe we could think of it from a wider perspective like that.
Absolutely. No, I love what you said so much in so many ways, and I want to get to the part, the aspects of our culture that are normalizing this, our music, right? And you know, and how many women actually not only do they encourage, even demand certain acts being done to them during sex in a relationship that is abuse, right? And you know, there are individuals who derive pleasure from that type of abuse. But then the question is, where do you draw the line, right? So what you said and to all of our points is, how do we create agents of positive change in our society? Because it has to start there. And if it's a learned behavior, the earlier the intervention, I think, the more successful we'll become. And the intervention starts from there, right?
So
because
we have to be teaching this in the school.
Absolutely.
Because that's what I wanted to touch on. I believe that there is a need for education at all levels, from the school, starting at the primary school, because even though these children are small, they can remember lots of things they see on the TV. And if they are taught about domestic violence at the preschool, they must remember something to go into the high school with. The schools, all the schools, the preschools, the churches, all the groups in the churches, because sometimes we take it for granted that this person is a teacher and she knows what is domestic violence. But you will be surprised what this teacher is allowing for years and think that this is the norm and nothing is wrong with it. Until something like 16 years after she come and she make a report and said, this is happening since the night we got married. All along she thought was love, but then she just come to her senses that it is abuse. And sometimes when they come to the unit to make the report, they don't even want the police to warn the offender. All they want is just for them the records. Sometimes they don't even want to give a statement. Sometimes they give a statement and they say, don't tell him anything, don't want him, I don't want him to know that I came to the police. I just want it for the records in case something serious happens to me.
That's sad.
So this is how serious it gets.
It's sad. But they're not willing to actually do anything.
No,
They just want you to have a statement in case of death.
Exactly.
No, I'm glad that the special victims unit was established, because when I was in my situation, when I went to the police station to make a report, my abuser found out about the report even before I reached home. So sometimes we have police who are friends with the abusers, and once the person goes to make a report, the police officer will call the person and say, well, this person goes to make a report and you answer XYZ or whatever. And so that's why I'm glad that the special victims.
Maybe that's the problem we have in them,
Yeah,
confidentiality.
But what I'm hearing is that we are all, in one way or another, victims of abuse, because either by being the enforcer of abuse, either by being tolerant to it in some way or another, either by turning a blind eye to it, either by not recognizing it for what it really is. We have a society where abuse is so much more prevalent than we are willing to admit. Because this is not happening in a vacuum. This is happening throughout society.
And one thing too, what I recognized for our last couple of years, October is very much filled with activities, and you rarely hear about domestic violence, because October is filled with breast cancer, mental health, Down syndrome, and you don't hear about domestic violence as much as you hear about the others.
Well, I didn't know about them, so yeah. I'm going to be honest with you.
I'm going to be honest now. Last year, I met this young lady. She was working with our observer to do an interview, and she said, "Why are you not talking about domestic violence?" I was like, "What?" And she said, "What?" I said, "This is the elderly month, breast cancer." And she said, "You didn't know it was domestic violence month?" I said, "No." I said, "But I promise you, as long as I have breath and life, next year,
Well,
we will do something." Huh?
Advocacy is
It's important.
Yes, and I didn't know about it either.
It's important.
So that's why we are here, because of this young lady, because she reminded me, well, put it in my head, it exists. And I started thinking about, I didn't know if I'm going to live to see this year, but I'm happy I'm here with you guys. And I'm happy that you're here, because even when we spoke, I never knew you were a victim, a past victim. So, because everybody looks normal, you know.
Yeah, and yesterday, as I listened to some of the reports from Charles and from the officers there about persons, just wanting to put something on record, just in case. It just reminds me and reinforces a question that we asked Dr. K. Why do people stay? And one of the things that we did not discuss is number one, people stay for intimidation. Because a lot of times, persons are threatened. If you leave, I have this bigger tape of you in compromising position, you can't leave. People stay maybe. And we have to think about our immigrants. Maybe their status is not legal. They're afraid if they report it, they're going to lose their status. But there are things that we can do to help to support persons. And I'm saying support. If somebody is experiencing abuse, we can't show up like we know it all.
Right.
And we can't show up and be judgmental.
Yeah.
Okay? We have to show up as
we have to show up and be
empathetic. We have to show up with support, recognizing that we can't rescue them. At the end of the day, they have to make the decision to make the changes to their situation. But from the point of view of leading them as to lead to themselves, from the point of view of just listening to them in a non-judgmental way, we can offer support. Because if we show up and we started, why you staying there, they're going to defend.
But sometimes the abuse will just end after you leave the relationship. You still have to deal with the person stalking you and calling you and texting you and sending messages.
Abuse.
And I could only
it's like you're free, but you're not really free.
Especially if you have children, you have to deal with it. You can't even get away.
Exactly.
And the abuse is a cycle. Okay? It is a cycle. And the part that we see as onlookers is the part where we see the abuse, maybe the physical abuse. But in the cycle is not only bigger. The cycle has fitness too.
I had a situation to deal with. Like 2 weeks ago, where it happened in St. Peter's. Different persons called me to tell me that a lady was up there being abused. And that after 24 hours, we told them I got together, and she said, "Oh, nobody saw him hit me," and things like that. What can I do in a situation that most I did was just talk to her and tell her if it happens again, I gave the numbers to call her. So, but it feels like I'm in a rock and a hard place because it's more than one person that called me to tell me what's going on, and no, and the guy I got together is like she's saying nothing happened, and they were witnesses, so it's like everybody is telling lies because she's that victim and she's saying nothing happened. So sometimes that is very difficult for you who's trying to help her.
Yeah, this cycle has four parts. We have that part where you have the tension building up. So yes, we have these external stressors that's happening, and the abusers start to get stressed, and the tension starts to build. And then we have another phase in which there's the actual abuse, where there's beating, there's insulting, name calling, etc. And then we have the phase where after the community abuse, there's the reconciliation phase, and in that
And
phase,
also the honeymoon phase.
the honeymoon phase, and honey is sweet, so it gives us an idea of how sweet this phase actually is. And during that phase, the person is going to show. Sometimes the abuser will show the person with their case.
There's chocolate, goes and dates.
Dates, as you say, chocolate,
flowers.
and flowers. They are they appear to be very understanding of the person's needs. Okay, and that gives the person a sense that
Everything is okay.
Everything is all right. They have changed, and because the abuser has this devoted behavior to this person, what starts to happen is that the brain starts to release dopamine and oxytocin and all these are feel-good hormones and hormones associated with bonding. So then you have a bonding, an extra bonding start to happen there, and it's sweet. And then in the other phase we have a calming phase. So you see how much sweet phases they have here? Apart from the honeymoon phase, there's a calming phase in which, they're trying to find some reason for the behavior. So they might think, the person might say, okay, they come up with some sort of explanation to justify why they were abused. That you have the apologizing, and then you point out factors to justify the behavior. But it's not really apology, because they're not owning up to the responsibility of their behavior. But the person is receiving all this, and they give the impression, the calming phase gives the impression that okay, this is the real partner. I get my partner back, This is the real relationship here. And then after that stage is like bam, you go back to the top again. Tension starts to build, and then the abuse.
But thinking about it, let's be real. You don't sound like a regular relationship, because you got that going and So how do we know that it's abuse? It's heaped over into abuse because you don't have follow time.
Yeah, but follow time does not
Remember, bear in mind, all abuse ain't physical. What if it's a different form of abuse, not physical?
Well, I think that's where the lines are a little blurred. But follow time does not include a manipulative component where that phase of making up is not for the sole purpose of trying to normalize that behavior. That behavior has to be addressed, right? If you've gone over that line, you have to address this and ensure that you have done everything remedial to ensure that it never repeats itself. Okay, but if I'm doing this to sort of cover up what has just happened, with no intention of ever, whenever there's a crisis of that nature, of employing any other measure to deal with it, I will fall right back into the
same thing. So you're saying in a normal relationship, you talk it out, work it out, respectfully, you seek help. But if you don't do any of that,
right,
and you're just going through the honeymoon phase, and it's like you're covering it.
But I think the challenge I face is, and this is why I say that this is such a big societal concern for me, is that even when there is very overt forms of abuse, I ask myself, how is it that this man is able to get another woman in the same society?
Because of his charisma or his status in the community.
But why do you think that you would suffer any different a fate to the person that was with
some
you?
women feel like they are the
and some women just say people chose to become poor. That's what some women say.
Some women think they are better.
I can do it better.
Yeah. But it ain't even about us.
It's about him.
But then what you have essentially done is that you have actually shame and blame the first victim and say essentially that the reason why this person was an abuser is because of that. So you've been a better woman.
And that's so sad as women, because we could nip it in the butt there, and you never get the next woman in the country. And you have to go overseas. No, but because we want to be a better woman. If we know he's an abuser, some people know this person is guilty of that,
So,
but then you may not see the person as the problem.
No,
the animal as the problem. And people, because they have different sides. So in talking with them, you're going to see all the different sides. But then the good side comes out. Some people have some very good sides.
Yeah. How about
And then they have the problematic sides.
how about you play like we were you would create a predator? They get a database.
Exactly.
That's where you're
That's how we always say,
So is that something that we need to put in place?
no, probably that's not psychotic, no. Tell me. We are saying, no, inside there's no more makeup. Just how we have a child predator.
You post him.
You could have,
Maybe some of them need to be put in place. So when they are found out,
have anything in place like that for predators, for children.
But you know that
in
sometimes those behaviors attract persons to you.
But that's what I'm saying.
what do you mean?
They don't- they- they-
There's no in our society now being an aggressor. That's something that's our young woman or little man. This is something that they are looking for. I mean, our society has changed a lot. From you're looking for a nice young man or young woman, decent and blah 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 blah. Our society has changed a lot since when I was growing up.
Exactly.
And so now everybody looks for somebody that they can identify with. Well, okay, because for the life of me, I don't understand why a young man or young woman will say, if my man or my woman don't beat me, he don't love me, right? I shy away from those things because I know what domestic abuse is all about. It's not just about me. I mean, even if I've been abused domestically, you have to understand the position that the victim is in. It's not about me. I have 6 other children. I have 6 children for this man, right? If I leave, where am I going to put them? One, how am I going to feed them? I'm just working for $350 a week. I'm on step or whatever it is. My income is not enough to feed them. You understand? I can't look after them for myself. If I have 6 children and I move back in my mother's house, it's not enough room here to go back to my mother's house or to my sister's house. And even if I go to my sister's house, my sister's going to give me a terms and condition. You understand? Because I'm a big woman. You can't come in here late. You got your children to look after, and then your children are mixing with children, and your children are disgusting and whatever. You have to look at the dynamics of all of it, and that's something that is why they don't leave. You have a mother that will tell you, if I had the first one and male one, it's easier to run with one than to run with 2. You understand? After you start getting 2 or 3 children, you can't run one away. You understand? So I have to now try to protect my children. You understand? Trying to show them that this is not, your father is behaving like that or your mother is behaving like that. That doesn't mean that you have to behave like that. Right? And you have to have a good mother, a good support system to teach children differently. Okay, I'm talking in body cup, but let me get real. This is a forum that you can express. I grew up in a domestic abuse house with my mother had 6 of us. And it was good, sometimes it was bad, sometimes. God knows, I'm a Christian and I used to pray that he did. Every time something would happen to him and he gets sick, he goes to Janet and the nurses then work miracle, bring him back alive, and then he reach back home, and I'm so upset with them when he do come back.
Right.
You understand? Because I just want to get rid of this man. How can you tell a mother with 6 children to move out of the house when her income is small and you're depending on this man to feed them? You understand? It's hard, and that's how sometimes you just can't. Although you want them to leave, I've had many persons come to the house and say, ask my mother, why you don't just leave this man? But as much as she wants to, she has children to look for, and she will tell us, your father behaved like that because he consumed alcohol, and she will give us all the good reasons why he behaves like that. But that doesn't mean that you have to behave like that. You understand? I'm carrying you to church to learn it come up, you know, in a different way. I mean, my father grew up in church. That's what I say. But then, you know, she tried to groom us in a way that we don't be a nuisance to society when we go out. But how many mothers would do that? I remember I remember at one time we were much bigger in our teens, and we can defend our mother now, you know. And my brother, who is a year younger than I am, daddy pull a mattress and he pull one too. You understand? Before mom go talk to daddy, she gone to me brother and tell him, put it down. You understand? Put it down. Put down the matter. I don't want you to come like your father. Put it down. You understand? And she took it, although daddy was waiting and coming after her, she pulled her son. You understand? I said, this is not the path that I want you to go up in. Right? So he actually had to, he put it down and he just left the house. Right? I was upset because I want him to beat him up. You understand? But how do you curb society like no that way? She's a Christian woman. We pray a lot and stuff like that to get out of the situation, but to tell you honestly, she has not left him even up to that. You understand? She stuck with him throughout. She said, this is my cup. I have to bear it. I tell her, okay, that is your cup, but this ain't mine. I drink it from my mom. I ain't drinking from the cup. You understand? So how can we change the thinking? We can only change the thinking of society if our victims can seek not to have our children grow up like that, nip it in the bud and it is small. In our culture, how we treat our boys differently than we treat our girls. You understand? We have the girls as you have to be a house, you have to be in the house, you have to know how to keep house and stuff like that, and we have our boys running around. You're the man, you're the this, you go play the balls and stuff like that. Now is not the time to do that. We have to treat everybody holistically. Look at it holistically. Boys, go wash the dishes. You understand? Clean the house. You have to take, girl, you can go and play football. You can go and do this. So we have to curb it as a society. You understand? And not make the boys feel like they are macho and they have to rule. Or the girls, you have to rule now because you have feminine that kind of thing here. You understand? But we have to look at it at a holistic point of view and treat our boys and our girls the same. So when they grow up, even though they are exposed to this sort of abuse, they can think for themselves and they can say, I have seen so and so, and I refuse for that to happen to myself. And I can think around it, and if I find myself being so angry or whatever, I can seek help. And I can check into somewhere and say, I'm married, I realize that I'm being angry all the time, or I'm being aggressive to my family all the time, I need help. And once you can tell yourself that you need help, that's really the first thing.
And I'm listening to you, Rebellion. I mean, it's fascinating to hear a story. And thank you again for sharing that with us. I think it's important. But there's so many nuances to that type of dynamics. And the other that is closer to home for me is having a provider at home, and that person isn't all bad. That person is an abuser. And as a child, you have to reconcile that abuser, who is also, in many ways, a good parent. And you begin to find some ways in your head, because you speak of that extreme where you wish that person dead, and you really want that person just eliminated from the home environment, and you don't care. But there's the other part where you have that compassion toward that individual. As a child grew up in the house, that's your daddy, right? And your daddy does bad things, but he's not necessarily a bad person. And you have to find a way to love daddy while still recognizing that daddy does some bad things, okay? And to do that is also normalizing some of daddy's behavior in your mind, because if you start thinking that everything daddy does is bad, daddy's therefore a bad person. And it's a lot for that child growing up in that home. And that's how slowly we begin to accommodate some form of abuse, I believe, and Dr. Kare, please correct me if I'm wrong. We begin to accommodate some form of abuse in our mind that is okay, it's not too bad. Well, daddy goes up over the line a couple times because he punched mommy, right? And that is what I think children are facing. And the question, and I think this is probably one of the biggest dilemmas we're facing right now, because that is still good, right? And then you have a mother like yours, for example, who helps to even reinforce that even further because she stays in the environment, right? So if mommy stays there, that it can't be all that bad, can it?
Right.
Okay. So then you get into a relationship, and then some things start happening in that relationship, and you begin to accept it as someone.
But you realize though that children start being the victim first, and then come the perpetrator, but yet they are victims, and they are victims from very young age.
Right.
So even though they are adults perpetrators, they are victims. And I think that's where Papa will come in with a need to nip it in the butt. Right.
But we have to empower people, because empowerment shouldn't mean we are an adult thing. It should be empower children.
That's what
To ask them about, do you love yourself? Because I think that's why some people are more vulnerable than others, because we have all kind of issues, depression, anxiety, and feeling not worthless, and these things and the things outside the environment contribute to us daily, makes us feel like that. And if we are in a situation where we are feeling good about ourselves, we wouldn't probably be so susceptible to that, because we are not feeling good about ourselves. We are more torn in that direction. We are more needy and want that attention, and then we get it from the, God forbid, the perpetrator, somebody who is supposed to be trusting, somebody who is in the home that we're supposed to be loving, and then we get it all mixed up in the head, and then it could go like that too. So I think empowering people on a whole, children and adults, because I can't even say adults alone, children need empowerment too. And look at the things what they could accomplish with empowerment, with a positive somebody coming in their home. It might even be somebody in the home. It might be in the home of the child. It might be the auntie, like Sister Finney. She needs and every them love her. And that's such a good thing, because they look up to her, they value her, they share with her. So when we have somebody positive in these homes, even though the perpetrator might have been there already, it could help, I think. Could help, because they need empowerment. And children are so honest. They'll tell you straight up, they ain't like this, they know you wrong. They pick up on vibes you might miss. So if we start to empower them from an early age, I think it would help.
In 2019, one of the activities that my youth had was
Silence No More, right?
Silence No More. We had a youth empowerment workshop, and one of the activities that the teenagers had to do was stand in front of a mirror and say something positive about themselves and something negative about themselves. And it was so difficult for them, because it's like they're looking at themselves and they have to be honest with themselves, so it was so difficult for them. Some of them end up starting to cry because of the words that came out of the mouth they can't believe, because the task was to say something positive about themselves and then say something negative, something that people always tell them. And so it was very difficult, but we got through how we wanted to get through. So I think that's something that people need to do. We teach them to be assertive, use I statements. You have to demand what you want. I
also want to, when we speak about children or the victims that are trying to fix the abuser, trying to empathize with the abuser, when we speak about that, a book comes to mind, Boundaries by Henry Cloud. I think this is where we have to show children, let's tell the children for now, and even the victims, that him or her beating you should not feel bad for them in this case, abusing you should not feel bad for them. At this point, it's beyond, it's on your neighbor's yard, it's not on your yard, meaning boundary-wise. So you don't take the abuse and try to fix it. At this point, your main concern is to at least fix whatever you are receiving and let the abuser fix him or herself or someone fix them. So if that means leaving with the children or leaving the family and so on, then sure, over time we will come back and see how we can amend the relationship. Yet him or her is a nice person in society, or outside of the abuse, they are a really cool person. Then they come down to the reconciliation or the calm stage. But ultimately, it's not your duty to fix the abuse. Another point that I wanted to touch on is I realized that in most of these abuse, it's like a cage. If a dog in a yard, once you release the cage or the tray, over time, mentally, you would still go to that boundary line. You would not. So you would be, yes, they love me, you miss it. The cage is no longer there, but you have been mentally enslaved to just tolerate or just go along with this. And maybe we should, I will go back to the point where it is, call abuse by its name. In every aspect is call it by its name, right? This don't be silent. We have a rapid loud campaign per se about domestic violence. Have some people that put the spotlight on it, because during my research for this, I did not even know that I knew something about domestic violence. But one of the things that kept coming out is, if we continue to cover it, then it will continue to go. So if we put the spotlight on it, whether the person has a big position or what, if we put the spotlight on it, then over time it should be used to some extent.
Yes, I think so.
That was my takeaway from
Even in the home, now have a conversation with it. The pandemic really brought it out. I would see now, because the fathers and everybody was together now in the one home, whereas before he never used to come home. So then now everybody frustrated, because everybody was naturally frustrated.
But so there's also a problem in terms of our outlet for our anger and which things. I think that's why express yourself. As we wrap up, I mean we're wrapping up now. I want to get some final words from the panel here, and I also want to share some of the resources again. It's so important that individuals know, because assuming that I was being abused, I would not know where to go to send kids. So I suspect that I'm not the only one who perhaps lacks that kind of direction. So as we wrap up, final words from the panelists here. What is the next step? When we leave here today, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start the first conversation with myself. I think the first look for me is to look in the mirror and see whether I am abused or I am abusing somebody else. I think we must, it has to start an honest conversation. We must, the Bible says it, right? The plank in your eye first before you move the plank in your inside. Right? So I think it's important for us to really start that conversation with ourselves, and then around the dinner table, right? Around the dinner table, allow individuals to express themselves. The archetypal male who lacks social skills and says very little, that person now needs to be able to express themselves, express their anger, their own frustration, and we now need to know how to deal with that as a society. It requires an all-society approach if we are to even make any kind of headway with this. There's a lot that's lacking, from economic empowerment, physical empowerment, right? If you're going to take somebody out of a home, we need to find a way to actually have that person learn some type of skill set and find a way that they can financially care for themselves and for their family. So, final words from, I'll start with you.
In domestic violence is not really easy, it's not an easy thing to deal with. So that's why we try to help us, even though it might be hard, might be difficult to do, try and get somebody who can be a confidant. So even though you don't necessarily go to gender affairs or to the special victims unit, you know somebody have the information about your abuse. Or even you could write it down in a diary, get a diary every time abuse happens. You jot it down, put down the date, the time, what was said, if you can remember all that. That's my takeaway. Just try to have a confidant.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Wilson?
Well, domestic abuse is real. It affects me emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, you know. It's unfortunately, it's a part of our society. And like you said, Dr. Kare, it starts with me. to look in the mirror and see if I am a victim or am I the perpetrator, you know, and reach out for help. Have a conversation with yourself and honestly reach out for help and say, I have my family, I love my family, and what can I do to protect my family? And if I have to take that first step and call Dr. Crawford and say, Dr. Crawford, I need help, and this is what is happening, and how can you help me? Just reach out. And if you don't want to reach out by yourself, find a support system. Maybe it's somebody in your church or a colleague on your job, or for the children, maybe it's your best friend or your best friend mom. You know, find an adult that you can talk to and say, this is what's happening in my house, and I love my mommy, I love my daddy, but this is what is happening. How can you help us? You know, and just be there for that person, be there for that child, see how you can help that child to get through the difficult times.
Thank you. Sister Finley, how can something like express yourself? I mean, platforms like this, which I suspect we need a lot more of. As doctors, there's something called Schwartzwrong, which I recommended that Jennifer never happened. But Schwartzwrong was something that would allow healthcare workers to just come and just speak candidly without any fear of any sort of reprisal or repercussions and so on, and just speak openly. And that sometimes just getting things off your chest, a catharsis of sorts. But I love that. I want to speak more to you, want to express yourself. But just in your closing thoughts.
Yes, in my closing thought, domestic violence is real. It comes in many forms. First, we must recognize that we are abused, or recognize when someone is abused, and to spread the awareness that they know that they are abused. Because sometimes little things, like verbal injury, assault, and all of these are abuses. Sometimes people don't recognize their abuse. And as we hear it across the room here this afternoon, that some persons are abused. They go to the police and they do not want the victim to know that they have reported. So they suffer in silence. And sometimes when you are alone, this is where you're faced with all these, abuse, and to some persons in society, they don't want society to know that I am so well dressed and this is what happened to me. But for me, I normally speak up and speak out. I have a no-caring attitude, and I'm letting people know what's happening to me and what's going on. I was in a relationship, why I leave. So it's no secret, right? And you have to stand up. And this is why I want to express yourself, so we can be bold with this thing. And when I say what I have to say, yes, everybody is around me, and let me point the finger, but I am walking like, yet do I walk to the valley with the shadow of death?
Thank you. Officer, the last thing to get right.
Okay, I would just like to say that persons have to be truthful, because I realize when someone has done something wrong and they hide it, they continue to do wrong things. And so when persons come to the police to make report and they request that the offender be warned, sometimes the offender speak the truth and say from when he started being abusive. And sometimes when these things happen, he admits that he wants counseling, and then we refer it to gender affairs, who will get the counseling unit involved. But as I said earlier, some of the times the victims request no further police action. Just put the report there and don't even warn him. And that is because sometimes they are too proud. They don't want anyone to know that they made this report. They don't want the friends or the family member, not even the abuser, to know that they made a report, and so the abuse will continue until it reaches to a stage where it gets out of hand. So I would like persons to really after going through all the different options, writing a diary and talking to a church sister or brother, sometimes unless these reports reach to the police or reach before the magistrate court, you won't get any help or any ease, or the abuse will not stop. It's only when the report reach in the hands of the police or reach in the magistrate court that is when the offender understands himself and the abuse stop. So I will encourage people, sometimes you may want to hold off and wait and see if things will change, but we have to realize that we cannot change anyone. And we are not supposed to be making excuses for anyone's problem in regards to being abusive. So we just have to be truthful and seek the relevant help that is available. That's my point.
Ms. Charles?
Okay, for me, I just want to let persons know out there that the justice system works. I know they talk a lot about confidentiality, but I've seen perpetrators removed from their home and the victims stay at the home until they can find a place to stay. So the system works. Try the system, it works. For us, from the 25th of November to the 10th of December, we call 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So we do, every day we do activity for 16 days, and that's in November, and it goes right up until 10th of December, which is Human Rights Day. That's for us. So look out for our activities from the department and involvement. So I hope everyone here can support as well. Dr. Pierce asked me to talk about or mention the referral services again that we have. We have the counseling unit, we have the special victims unit, we have the legal aid department, we have community development, we have probation and child protection services. We have 2 units that have on-call phones. 2 units. Gender affairs have an on-call phone. If you can't get the police, you can call gender. If you want to call gender just to say, refer me to counseling, we have an on-call phone which is 662-5492. That's gender affairs on-call phone, 662-5492. We have special victims unit has an on-call phone as well. It's 662-7077. The Special Victims Unit on-call phone, 662-7077. Yes, and those are the 2 numbers that are on-call phones. You can call those phones at any time. When I said, girls, I have to leave, I have to leave if that phone rings. I'm so sorry where I am, I have to leave. Because somebody could be dying. And they would say they call gender. Then the family will want to know, then what happened when you call gender? Nobody answered. I would have to answer to that around a table with a PS, a director, right? And maybe a lawyer. So those are the 2 numbers which are very important for the public to know and to call.
I would love to divide my closing statement in 3 sections. One to the parents of homes now, as children learn by example, and we have to think about the future. So where the things that we tolerate or we allow now will eventually come back to hurt someone, maybe 10, 15 years on the line, and hurt begets to hurt. So it continues because it was tolerated. So for parents now, think about that. Think about your grandchild or the great-grandchild or somebody else's grandchild. No. And 2, the community, let's start abuse listening. Let's, in schools, churches, every organization, even on the lampposts, let's start abuse listening. If we do that, if we call it out now, then my 3rd point here is, we will now see what it is. See, and then therefore, we now know what is allowed and what is not allowed on a wider scale, not necessarily by individuals. to those who have been abused or who may find themselves in a case, as I mentioned, doing my research for this, it helped me to realize there's so much more about domestic abuse, especially from a relationship level, that I didn't. So know your worth, know the early signs, evaluate yourself, and speak about it. Don't be afraid to say that you know how it is abusive because I have a huge condition or because you want to achieve. At the end of the day, it's not your job to fix that problem. So speak about it.
Okay. Dr. Crawford, final word.
The effects of domestic abuse is vary, and I know we haven't spoken much about the effects of domestic abuse, but it varies from person just feeling unworthy or hopeless to person who's experiencing disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety and depression, person having suicidal thoughts and attempts, etc. So it really varies the impact if domestic violence has on people, and not just those who are directly involved, but those who are indirectly involved, because we might have domestic abuse between parents, but the children, they are in the home too, and they can be and will be affected. So it reinforces the importance for us to continue to advocate for healthy relationships. And on that note, I would like to encourage persons to speak up whenever they are being abused. And if they're not sure, speak up, and that could be clarified for them. I want to encourage persons to offer support to those who are experiencing abuse. And it's very important, as I would have said before, to not be judgmental, but to listen and to guide them or direct them to where they can get additional help. It's important that persons access services that we have available, and Ms. Charles would have outlined those services that work directly with gender appeals. We also have the counseling services at the JNF Psychological Services, and you just call JNF Hospital, ask to come to the psychology department, or ask to come to Dr. Crawford, and you will get our service. We also have the counseling center, and their number is 465-5000, so you could always call that number. And if you feel embarrassed or shame, or you feel like you don't want too many persons in your business, we still have persons who are offering private counseling too, because some persons they shy away from the public services because they feel they want something more private. So we have the bank psychological solution, that's 466-0899, and we have other persons out there who are offering counseling and who will be able to support them. So please seek help, please to speak out, and together, hopefully, we will make a dent in this pandemic, within the pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. Keisha, I will leave the final view over time, but I will give you the final remarks to you.
Okay. Are you being abused? How are you being treated, or how are you treating someone else? You have to recognize the signs of domestic abuse. Does your partner embarrass or make fun of you in front of your family and friends? Put down your accomplishments. Make you feel that you are able to make decisions. Use intimidations or threats to gain compliance or control over you. Tell you that you are nothing without them. Treat you roughly, grabbing you, pushing you, pinching you, shoving you, hitting you. Call you several times a night or day and show up to where you are to make sure that you are there. Uses alcohol or drugs as an excuse for saying harmful or hurtful things or abusing you. Does your partner blame you for how they feel or act? Pressure you sexually for things you aren't ready for? Make you feel that there is no way out of the relationship? Prevent you from doing things you want, like spending time with family and friends? Does your partner try to keep you from leaving after a fight, or leave you somewhere after a fight to teach you just a lesson? Do you sometimes feel scared of how your partner behaves, and do you feel that one day it might escalate more than how it's already going? Do you constantly make excuses to other people for your partner's behavior? Do you believe that you can get help for your partner or change or try to change your partner? Do you try to do anything or think that you're causing the conflict or that you're the one making your partner angry? Do you always try to do things that your partner wants so you can prevent an argument? Do you stay with your partner because you are afraid of your partner or what they will do to you or the children or even another loved one in the home? If these things are happening in your relationship, talk to someone. Call any of us here today. Without help, the abuse will continue. Make the first step, please, and call to seek for help. It is a courageous step. Remember, no one deserves to be abused. The abuse is not your fault. You are not alone. Don't worry if you don't speak the local language. We'll get help for you in any language. And remember, please, that you are loved.
Thank you. I think everything has pretty much been covered and said. There's very little for me to say except that we have only really scratched the surface in this very important topic. I think it now should rest in everyone's mind alongside all the other important activities like Breast Cancer Month and the likes. This is a very important debate, one because of its prevalence, one because it impacts society all over, right? It may very well be that it's your son or daughter who marries my son or daughter, and we find ourselves in a situation where we continue to perpetuate abuse throughout several generations in the future. So I think we have somewhat opened what might be very well Pandora's box for many individuals, but this is important, and as a society we can change. As a society we can evolve. What was once right is no longer, because there's now light being shed on it. I want to invite you to join us. We hope to have more debate about this. We'll take it to the airs, we'll take it to the airwaves wherever we can. And again, start the conversation today, start with yourself. And if you need any type of assistance, we've mentioned some resources here that can be available to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing us into your homes this afternoon. And we look forward to speaking to you more. Have a good day, everyone.